Do Not Disturb, a short story by Sean Norton. It was a brisk night in the middle of September. A few of my friends came over for our first get-together for our senior year of high school. We were joking around and taking turns playing Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You know, normal teenager stuff. It was around midnight when we started winding down and were trying to decide what movie we wanted to watch. Usually we would watch a horror comedy movie like Tucker and Dale vs. Evil or Zombievers, just for something to have going on in the background. We decided to watch Killer Clowns from Outer Space. After the first 10 minutes, Chad started talking about their old science teacher, Mr. Miles, who supposedly killed himself last spring. We all agreed that the police were hiding something. Things just didn't add up. He was the best chemistry teacher that school had. He was the most liked teacher, always making a difference in students' lives and faculty's lives. According to his family, he and his wife got along so well, and his daughter was such a daddy's girl. What really didn't make sense was where they found his body. Why would he be over an hour away from home in a basement of an abandoned facility? We all agreed that we would go to the place where they found his body in the morning. Well, everyone except for Charles, that is. From the second we started talking about his suicide, Charles was acting strange. He seemed quiet, not having much input, but it wasn't just that. He seemed distant, like his mind was somewhere else completely. He had a strange, worried look on his face that would twitch into a grin randomly. I shook his shoulder and said, "Snap out of it, man, are you okay?" He shook his head a little, and his face seemed pale. It was hard to tell with the only light in the room being from the TV. We asked him if he would take a trip to the abandoned facility with us in the morning. He looked at me with a cold, uncomfortable look in his eyes. After what seemed like a full minute, he responded, "My father told me to never set foot near that place after what happened there. He has told me stories about the McClellan's curse." After saying that, he got up quickly and grabbed his bag. I called him and asked him where he was going. He responded by saying, "I'm going home, and if you ever want to go home again, I suggest you don't go to that place tomorrow. Bad things happen there, Shaz." He turns around and hurries up the stairs. The door slams behind him, and a few seconds later, we heard tires peel out of the driveway. Moments later, the room goes dark. The credits start rolling down the screen. The room was silent, other than the quiet theme music coming from the TV. I looked over at the others, and we said nothing. We all just felt kind of creeped out. Charles had never acted like that before. He never backs out of anything, especially if it's a chance to investigate. With minimal conversation, we turned the TV off and set our alarms for the upcoming day. Ring, ring, ring! We shot up, excited for the day ahead of us. We kept the same clothes on from the day before and we got into the car. The sun wasn't even up over the horizon yet, right on time. We drove over the hills and around the twisty roads until we saw the street sign, Academy Street. The road looked like any other road, houses with families inside. We saw parents getting ready for work through the windows with the occasional dog barking at us as we drove by. We pulled over into a car park about halfway down the street and got out of the car. "Where's the back entrance to this place again?" asked Chad. "It should be right down the street, to the right," I replied. As we walked toward the back entrance, the world around us seemed to get quieter. The houses looked less kept up at this end of the street, and there didn't seem to be anyone living in some of them. Finally, there it is. The two stone pillars on both sides of the access road. The pavement was breaking apart, and trees and plants were pushing their way through. There was barely a walkway. This road hadn't been used in over 20 years. As we approached the top of the hill, we looked around the bend, and there it was, the abandoned facility. The sun was just coming over the hills. It looked beautiful, yet neglected. There was a thin morning mist covering the ground, and the sunrise reflected off of the dew on the fallen leaves. Everything was dead still. No birds singing, no squirrels running through the woods. We climbed the hill to the building that overlooked the facility, the very building where they found Mr. Miles. Christina grabbed my arm, and with a worried look in her eyes, said, "I don't think I want to go in there anymore. "You'll be fine. We need to climb the fire escape to get in through the roof. Pull down the ladder and I'll go first," said Chaz. We climbed up to the roof. We could see everything. The sun was peeking over the valley. We felt the warm tingle on our skin. We made our way inside to find an old wooden staircase. As we made our way down, it got colder. We felt dampness on our skin, and it smelled almost sour. At the bottom of the stairs, there was yellow police tape on the ground. Someone else must have been here since the police had left. We walked through the doorway to find satanic symbols on the walls and a giant pentagram on the floor in the middle of the room. The corners of the room still had carpet. They seemed to be stained with blood. The smell of the room seemed almost suffocating. It smelled unnatural. The metallic scent of blood stung our noses. We put on our masks and walked in. Now we know what happened. Well, have a good idea anyway. By the looks of this room, there was a bloodbath. The authorities tried to scrub away the horror, but things like this just don't go away. The energy alone was enough to make the hairs on my arms stand up. Bree and Christina were both hanging on to Chad and I. At the opposite side of the room, there was a steel door. It was open just a crack. I walked over and gave it a pull. It creaked and slowly opened, revealing a tunnel. "These must be the tunnels that run underneath the facility. Let's take a look," said Chad. The tunnels were small and narrow. I had to bend down to walk through them, and I'm not a very big guy. We went to a part where the tunnel branched into 3 parts. We stayed straight and found ourselves in what seemed like a large janitorial closet. We walked around another corner, and there was a large hall with doors lining both sides. "Looks like we found our way into the main hospital building," I said. As we walked down the hall, we peered into the rooms. Some were for storage, some just had been completely trashed, and others must have been offices. There were still patient records in the filing cabinets. At the end of the hall, we found one locked door off to the right. Bree took out her lock-picking kit and started working at the door. "Why is this the only door on this floor that's locked?" asked Christina. Just as she finished her sentence, the door clicked and slowly opened. As we pointed our flashlights in the room, we noticed what room it was. This was the mortuary. As we walked in, we smelt the same smells we smelt in the first building, but this was way worse. I wanted to turn around and run, but my body wouldn't respond. I just kept walking forward. I looked to the right side of the room, and I just stopped. I couldn't breathe. There, on the table, was a body. It had no arms, no legs, and the head was turned towards me. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. This lifeless body was staring at me, except its eyes were gone. I blinked, hoping my mind was just playing terrible tricks on me. It was still there. The metal table was covered in blood, and it was still dripping. I took a step closer and realized it was Charles. I started sobbing. I turned towards the girls. They were still looking at the other side of the room. I ran towards them and pushed them into the hall. I slammed the door, rested my head on the wall in the hallway, and threw up. My head throbbed and my nose and throat burned. They tried asking me what happened, but I couldn't even respond. I took out my phone and dialed 911. Over the speaker, all I could hear was the busy line. I looked down and I had no signal. I had a message from Charles that came in 30 minutes ago. It read, "You need to get out right now. I came to prank you guys thinking the stories weren't real, and now there's someone here. I could just feel their presence. Get out of here." This is the end. I knew it. I looked at the girls and asked, "Where the fuck is Chad?" Bree pointed behind me, and about 20 feet down the hall were Chad's glasses and his camera. We walked down, not knowing what to do. I picked up the camera and opened the last recording. It started off as a black screen, and then Chad's face appeared. "I thought I saw something in this one room back there, and when I came out, everyone was gone. I'm going to go out the way I came and meet them back at the car. I feel like someone is in the dark with me. I'm not going to keep this rolling until..." Whack! The camera dropped to the ground, and then we heard a thud. There was a faint chuckle in the background, and Chad's glasses fell into the frame on the ground in front of the camera. A second later, A large figure walked in front of the camera, down the hall towards the tunnels. As it walked, we noticed something. It had something over its shoulder. The figure started to disappear into the darkness when a flash of light flung around the hall, and we heard the girls over the recording. We must have been exiting the mortuary. For a split second, we made out the figure on the recording. It was a large man by the looks of it. He had Chad over his left shoulder and a meat cleaver in his other hand. "We need to get out of here now," I said. At this point, Bree and Christina's eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. I looked at them as calmly as possible and said, "Follow me." We ran up a flight of stairs to get to the main level. I see light, finally. Now we're in the main entrance area. The front doors are right in front of us. I pushed into the doors and hear a chain rattle on the outside. It's no use. We hear steps coming from the stairs we just climbed. Bree waves to go down the hall to the left. There has to be windows or a door or something down there. As we sprint down the hall, we see surgical rooms and equipment on both sides. There are still no doors leading outside. We must have run deeper into the facility. We turn a corner and stop. It's pitch dark again. Bree flicks the switch on her flashlight, but nothing happens. She hits it against her hand, and still no light. Now my flashlight is the only one that works, since Christina dropped hers running up the set of stairs. I see another intersection with a set of doors. "Lord, please be the way out," I whisper to myself. We jog to them and make our way up to a half flight of stairs. We turn the corner to just see a room full of vents and maintenance supplies. We hit another dead end. I just start to laugh. I lean up against the wall and laugh hysterically. "What's so funny?" snaps Christina. "We're gonna die, and there's nothing we can do. We're trapped in this place with something that enjoys the hunt. It would take a miracle to..." I almost finished when we heard a scream. Bree must have gotten lost without her light. I swore she was right behind us. We could hear her crying. We could still save her. I finally remembered the knife on my hip. I took it out and held it tight in my sweaty fist. We lightly jogged toward the sound of her cry, being as quiet as possible. We came up to the door that she was behind, and I got ready to drive my blade deep in this thing's chest if he was in there with her. I ran in to find Bree in a straitjacket in a wheelchair in the middle of the room. She was surrounded by medical trays and surgical lights that were in very dim setting. Christina ran up to her and tried to unstrap her. Bree was sobbing, and that's when we noticed the puddle of blood around her. I examined her quickly to see where the blood was coming from. That's when I saw it. It was coming from her stomach. I lifted up her arms to try to unstrap her, and she cringed and started sobbing even harder. Before I realized how severe the cut was, blood started spraying all over me, and her insides started slipping out onto her lap. I jumped back, looking down at her. "Run," she whispered, and went limp. Christina took my arm and pulled me out of the room. "There's nothing we can do other than get the hell out of here and get help," she said. We saw another set of stairs going down to the basement a couple doors down. This is our last chance to get out of here. The only thing that kept me moving was thinking there might be an emergency exit at the bottom. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, we saw it. A half-open door leading to the daylight, less than 50 meters away. We heard heavy footsteps from the opposite direction of the door. This was our chance. I took Christina's shoulders and looked her in the eyes. "I'm going to go after him while you run to the door. Once you get out of that door, do not stop running. Tell Siri to call 911 and start screaming when you see houses." She looks at me with tears in her eyes. "I need you to promise me you'll keep running and won't look back," I said. I can't leave you. We can both make it," she stutters. "I need to know that you're safe, Chris. I care about you too much for you to end up like the others. Now go," I said, while pushing her toward the direction of the door. She ran. "Come out and face me like a man, you psycho," I yelled. A loud, deep, menacing laugh echoed from where the footsteps had come from. I yelled and charged down the hallway with a knife in hand. I tripped on something and fell on my chest, knocking the wind out of me. I looked up to see a man staring down at me with a smile on his face. He reached for me, and I dodged his grab. I swung and sunk my knife deep into his thigh. He yelled in pain and anger. I pulled the knife through his leg as hard as I could. He fell back, holding his leg, but it was no use. By the size of that cut, he would bleed out within minutes. I sprung up and started kicking him as hard as I could in the ribs and in the side of the head. "This is for Miles and Chad and Bree, I yelled as I continued kicking. He was breathing, but not moving, and then he looked up at me, smiled, and closed his eyes. I leaned my back up against the wall and closed my eyes for a few seconds, exhausted from putting an end to this. I opened my eyes and saw that the door was still half open. I started running toward it, calling out for Christina, just praying that she made it out and got to safety. I got to the door and was about to step out when I saw Christina's body on the ground, right outside the door. I fell to my knees. She was laid on her back, with her hands by her side. Her head sat on her chest. A smile cut across her cheeks. Her eyelids were removed, and a cleaver protruded from her skull. I crawled over to her on my hands and knees. I could barely see with the tears in my eyes, but it was a good thing to not see your friend clearly like this. I heard a branch crunch behind me, and before I could turn my head, I felt a hard blow to the side of my head. Everything went dark. I start to open my eyes. Everything is blurry, and my head is pounding. I feel something around my chest and under my arms holding me up. I came into focus to see the large man with black clothing and a black mask standing next to the tree I was hanging from. "You came into my home, you killed my brother, now you will suffer," he said. I looked next to him and saw 2 ropes tied off to the tree. Then I realized the second rope was around my neck. He wiggled his fingers and slashed the cleaver into one of the ropes. The rope from under my arms gave way, and I felt the pressure around my neck. He started to laugh as I struggled to grab the rope and pull myself up. I struggled for a few more seconds, and the world faded to black.